Okay, I think that we are live on YouTube. I hope it's not doing a duplicate because I kind of backed up. We'll
It
see.
says live on YouTube on
Okay,
my screen.
I think it said that before it even went live, but we'll find out. Okay.
Okay.
All right, so here we go. I'm going to go live on Instagram, and then as soon as you pipe in, then turn your volume all the way down.
All right, I will. See you come up yet.
Hello, welcome. This is Natasha Edwina for the Spiritual Sexual Empowerment Show, Goddess Vibrations. Today, I am going to be joined by Michelle Rooney, and we are going to be talking about divine feminine revolution rising, a really powerful topic with a very powerful goddess. And here she is. Everyday Goddesses is her name on Instagram. So we are waiting for Michelle. Aha!
Hi.
There she is. All
Great.
right, and welcome, Jillian. Welcome, everyone who's joining. I would like to introduce you to Michelle. I am really excited to meet with her publicly like this because we've had many powerful conversations about this topic. I want to let you all know Michelle's a pediatric physical therapist. She's she's a mother. We both have teen girls. She's a health freedom and medical freedom advocate. She's very well known in that community, in that circle. She's spoken on stage many times. She has a huge following, and just somebody that I'm very proud to know and call a friend. So thank you for taking the time to be here.
Oh, thank you for that amazing introduction. It's so great to be here. I've been looking forward to this.
Awesome. And also, I want to mention too, for anyone that's watching this or joining, that something that really impresses me about you is you're so humble and unassuming, and yet you are probably one of the smartest women I've ever met in my entire life. And that's saying a lot because I'm in a PhD program with a lot of women in it. And I know you're a Columbia graduate, you're first generation Japanese American. Yeah, your mom was born in Japan, and you spent some time growing up in Japan as well as here. And I feel like in your life experience, you've really overcome a lot of obstacles, but people wouldn't know that by interacting with you or engaging with you because you've done it so gracefully.
Oh,
And
thank you.
you're welcome. And that is that aspect of the divine feminine that I think uh, is really useful right now, could be amplified in this world, is bringing that out in all women and men too, because that divine feminine is not just exclusive to female bodies.
Yeah, thanks for saying that. And of course, I say, like, you spot it, you got it, right? So I've always enjoyed and loved our deep dive conversations. We get into it, you and I. And so I really have considered you to be such a, there's friendship, of course. And there's this synergy that goes along with not only this like shared kind of esoteric interests, but also this like deep intelligence and curiosity, I think is one of the traits that we share. We're just so willing to do that deep dive. And I see that in you, and thank you for reflecting that back to me too. And I know when we first met and I saw the books that were on your mantle, I was like, oh, it's on now.
Yeah, they're still probably there right behind me. I swap them out a little bit now, but yeah, absolutely. I remember that first meeting that you came over, and then we ended up living together for a while.
Yeah, we did.
We're two mamas, like single mamas, cohabitating with our daughters, and I have a son as well. And I think that was a really special time in my life, post-divorce for both of us, because it's really similar, I think, to what's going on right now with COVID kind of knocking out the old way of living. And creating maybe these Uranus and Taurus conditions of needing to collaborate and come together. And I know when I was doing some research on the last Uranus and Taurus cycle, it was during the World Wars, right? And so a lot of the women were called to go into the factories and do the metalworking and all the stuff to help the war, basically. And so then they had to leave their children at home. And so what women did during that world crisis was collaborate and create community pods to cook for each other's children and to watch each other's children. And the women, I feel like maybe they didn't get recognized for their war efforts. I mean, we have Rosie the Riveter, which was like cool because they proved they could do everything a man could do, but they also like rose up and did even more than what the average woman can do by pooling together and coming together. So that's very much I feel, a divine feminine quality, and something that perhaps we need to be doing right now, coming together in our, more so in our small communities and supporting, because we have schools are sort of messed up and education is being shaken up and the workforce is being shaken up. And I'm feeling it as a single mom. I absolutely know that I need that community, and it's just, you know, my kids and I here. So it's really having to rely on that support system.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like we're at a very similar time in history too, and we're being invited again to look to creating community and tribe and sisterhood and supporting each other. And it's more so important now than it has been in a really long time. And it is a historic time right now. I feel like this election, I was just thinking, really pondering about this earlier today, especially. I mean, it's very evident that this is a historic election, but just today it really hit me, wow, how impactful this time is. These next couple of weeks are going to be for history, and especially being a mother too, and being an example, feeling so strongly about being an example for my daughter and for kind of children at large. You know, how we can embody this like sense of equanimity and calm through this absolute chaos that's going on right now. And I think that's one of the things that women can really bring to the table, is that like ability to navigate and be the calm in the eye of the storm, I think so.
For sure. And that just reminds me of another thing that I really appreciate about you personally, is when you lived with me, I was going through the height of the conflict of my divorce. It was really intense, and I was not my best self in my home space. And I'm like, oh wow, Michelle really, she is grounding. Like, she is super calm to be able to hold space when I'm in that space, right? And going through that chaos and navigating so much. And so that quality that you're speaking of right now, I feel like you really do a good job of embodying that.
Thank you. I mean, it was an important time for me too at that time. I was going through a lot of changes as well. And I think that we did a really great job of supporting each other through some like massive shifts. So I'm so grateful for that.
Absolutely. I think the thing that I miss the most, going back to some of these powerful conversations that we had, where our coffee, I drank bulletproof coffee at the time, you drank tea, but we'd kind of at a certain point in the morning intersect in the kitchen and just get caught up in conversation over our beverages that would spiral off into these like other dimensions, basically, about divine feminine, about the divine masculine, about health, about relationships, about sexuality, about how the world is shifting and what the future looks like. And I remember one of the things that we agreed on is that we both, and this was back in 2017, I think, beginning of 2017, is we were both saying we've been for a number of years downsizing. Right. And simplifying and clearing out clutter and preparing for something. And you and I could both feel something's coming. We don't know what it is, but we feel like we need to be light on our feet and not have a lot of things weighing us down, and trying to make life as simple as possible. And it takes time to declutter and be that way. And so it's really about getting rid of things. And that was part of your reason for moving in with me too, is you didn't want to furnish a whole space by yourself. You wanted something very simple and, you know, not to have a lot of belongings. And I was clearing out my garage at the time. I'm still in the process of doing that, and just getting rid of old stuff. And of course, when you get divorced too, you're unloading things that you accumulated after all those years being a family or married family. And so here we are in 2020. We couldn't have predicted this. We knew something was coming, but we couldn't have predicted this. And sure enough, though, it was that intuitive felt sense that, that we were preparing. And I feel pretty prepared, to be honest. I felt pretty prepared when this happened. I did not, it was shocking in a lot of different ways, but I did not ever feel out of control. I felt like somebody else was trying to control me, but I didn't feel like personally like scared in that sense or out of control, because I, been waiting for some kind of shakeup.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I think we spoke to it. We just didn't, again, we didn't know what the specifics were, but then like once it came, I feel like we both were just like, oh, here it is. And so it didn't have that. Yes, of course, again, just like you said, it was shocking and it was an adjustment, but it wasn't this like thing that like derailed us. So I think that was good, because then we were kind of just able to navigate that in a way that helped the people around us too. So,
and I don't know about you, but I felt it coming even more intensely before March, before COVID, because I felt it hit really hard when I knew something was up in September, when the mandate passed here in California. And I want to be careful about using certain words, because I do want this video to be not paused, and I want it to be distributed and out there and available to people. But those mandates showed me that there was a power grab in our state, and that was hoping to catch on. And then I was just noticing, I was like, this is off. Something's off. Why are they going after the 4% that are living peacefully and healthfully? And it's not, herd immunity is what, 70% is all you need, or
depends
something.
on
yeah. So I'm like, something's a little bit off. And then the next point where I felt like something was off was when Kobe passed, and some of the female journalists were kind of playing with this narrative of this hero narrative. And they're saying, but wait a minute, remember when he raped someone back in whatever? And it wasn't about, in my perception of it, it wasn't about calling him out on his deathbed. It was more about like, I don't know if hero is the best word. Can we adjust that? Can we say sports hero? And then also name the other human actions of the man. And when the women did that, in fact, one woman journalist didn't even say anything. She just posted the link to the news story from those many years ago, and she lost her job. And that, to me, I'm like, okay, now there's another. First, the mama bears are being suppressed with the mandates, and now the feminine voice of just speaking the truth about something that a well-loved man did. It was easy to hate Weinstein or some of these ugly, gruesome characters, right? But now it's a well-loved sports star, and we don't want to hear what his role in that movement, the Me Too movement, right? And so I'm thinking to myself, this is really interesting. Now there's another act of suppression which got me a little fired up because of the last one. And I felt like there's some kind of controlling forces that either, I guess, have always been there, but now they don't like maybe this feminine power rising. So that was another point. And then, of course, when COVID came. So now here we are, and I don't know how to navigate through other than to just stay grounded in the same things that we've been doing for all these years, and continue to keep our voices open and heard. But there is some grace involved with that I don't always embody. I think you do a better job of that than I do. And so, yeah, I mean, and this, because the reality is this world is lopsided with masculine and feminine. And there's one morning you said this to me, and it's profound, and it's always stuck with me, which is, we talk so much about how women emasculate men, but what about, there's no word for defeminizing us. Like in our culture, there's not even a word for defeminizing, because we live in a culture that is built for men. And so it's not even having to adjust our feminine way of being into a world built for men would be the equivalent of emasculation, right? on the daily
Yes.
basis, which is changing a little bit. And I thought, wow, that's a really profound thought. And with that, for everyone watching, I also want to say that when we're talking about these feminist principles, we both love men very, very much. In fact,
very much.
Very much. We can speak a little bit about that too. I want to share a story, another Michelleism, another story of something that you share with me later on. But yeah, any thoughts on any of that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I wanted to call attention to the fact that once you started talking about expression, especially feminine expression, I started to get a tickle in my throat. And I'm feeling very constricted here right now. Talking about, do you feel too?
Yeah, a little bit. And I noticed so interesting. Our people, our viewers popping in kind of went down too.
Yeah. So I wanted to call attention to that because it's one of the things, I feel like we are both doing, and I've been watching you because you are very more out in the world with expressing yourself, which I'm so grateful for, because I love the topics and the people that you bring in to interview. Everyone's so interesting, and I always learn so much. I'm very grateful to that. But one of the things that I am trying to be more expressive about is this, you just spoke to my, Columbia University, Ivy League background, and the intellectual conversations that we have had. And that's great. And I love having that foundation and the mind part. And I'm really doing so much deep dive work on myself to bring in the other more spiritual, heart-centered, channeled, source connected, sisterhood, ceremonial side of myself. And that's really scary, because that if you want to make it into that masculine feminine polarity within myself, right, and it's always macro to micro, micro to macro, as above so below. So that battle is waging within me as an individual person as well, right, of balancing out this desire and actually this deep need that I have to be seen as intelligent and smart and competent and strong and grounded. I want to be seen as and a warrior. I really identify with that aspect of me. And yet I have this very feminine, soft, intuitive, very spiritual side to me that I want to bring in and have as a counterpoint and that balance. And beyond balance, actually, that they catalyze each other. Because I've been really contemplating lately about how balance is great, and yet balance is somewhat of a static state. And I want to be dynamic, and I want to be this very kind of have a lot of range as a human being. So whether that's even embodiment practices, I've just recently been taking up Muay Thai kickboxing, which is it's badass and it's really working me. And yet I take the time every single time I have a training session in kickboxing, that during that same day, after I've punched so hard with my trainer for an hour, I will come home and I'll make sure that I'll do some sensual dancing just with myself, with the mirror, and a song that I love, to really get back into that soft feminine as well. And that range in my life is something that I aspire to just always embody, and also show my daughter what it's like. You can kick butt and you can be sensual and sexy, or beautiful or, just feeling in your element. So
you do that
I don't
really
know.
well. You do that really well. I mean, you're more badass than I am for sure. You're up at like 6 a.m. surfing in the cold water and doing like boot camp type workouts. And I'm like, hell no. Like if it's below 70 degrees, I'm wearing boots and a scarf. Like I'm not, you're like Navy SEAL training basically just for fun. And yet you're also this extreme nurturer, like this supreme nurturer. Like as a mom, you really take that seriously as your most important role. You have this mother bear energy that I've witnessed, and this ferociousness and fierceness, but it's like so loving. And you're so, I mean, because I've lived with you for, at least a year. I don't know if I've ever seen you raise your voice at your daughter, like this is something that I cannot claim. You ask my kids, they'll be like, oh yeah, mom yells. But, just being that nurturer, being so compassionate as well. And just, I know what kind of partner you are as well in your relationships, and the way that you nurture your partner. It's really beautiful to be able to express that, that wide range. And I think you really embody that. And that's why I wanted to have you on to talk about this topic, because that's the divine feminine energy that I think the planet needs right now. Somebody who's going to protect their babies, go to battle, fight ferociously if they're in harm's way, but also nurturing, healing, creating that space for healing. And again, that energy that we're talking about, divine feminine, divine masculine, that can exist in either sex. As you're saying, you embody both of those, that balance of energy within you.
Yeah. It's interesting because those words are so charged, especially now. Like I think for however much we talk about polarity and polarization as being an integral part of that, it's gotten to this point now where it's so like polarized to the point of, I don't know, the terms are even polarized. So it's harder to talk about it right now. To be as inclusive as possible, always, of course. And honoring also of how we're experiencing it. It's just a fine balance right now. So I've been taking to just in my mind, thinking of it a little bit more in terms of like the Chinese medicine aspect of like more yin and yang, because that takes away a little bit of the charge with the words masculine, feminine, or
right. And so one of the promos for the show, I talked about some myths that some people think about the masculine and feminine. One of them is that if we're talking about the feminine, we're not acknowledging gender neutral folks or non-binary folks, and it's really not about gender. The way that we're using the words is, it's energy. It's not really about gender. So I tried to speak to that a little bit, and then to also talk about the charged words, or the words that you hear over and over. Even I remember there was a time when I couldn't go out in Encinitas to grab lunch without overhearing somebody talk about polarity and relationship dynamics, and I'm like, oh, I'm so sick of it. Like, ugh. I mean, it's an important concept, but in the spiritual community, it just gets beaten down so much, right? So I hate to add to that already maybe overly conversed conversation, and try to take it a step further as far as like, how do we use that bigger than just our romantic relationship, right? Or our sex life, or whatever else, and take it, into the collective. And that's the piece that's really interesting to me.
So I like to talk a little bit more archetypally too, because then people can relate to that again from their own, without like attachment to the words so much too. So like when I like to speak of the feminine principle too, because then that feels a little bit more, well, it is archetypal, but it's also like, it's more about a concept versus like any biological aspect of it, I guess. So, the feminine principle, the primary feminine principle is care and compassion. And, having looked into some of the darker aspects of life here on Earth and being a human here on Earth, and tapping into those energies, like right now, and well, it's been going on for a while, but there is this kind of sense of not having that feminine principle be present in society and in us even.
Mm-hmm.
And how do we bring that principle back?
Fifth wave feminism. Yeah, I posted about that today too. And I had a follower, I don't know if she's still on, but she messaged me and said, how do you describe the different waves of feminism? Because there's a group of very spiritually enlightened folks who don't really buy into feminism because they're really into the unity consciousness. And they're like, does feminism mean that you don't like men or that you think that women are better than men? And it's not at all. And what I explained to her is that I actually forwarded an article, but I told her we'd talk about it tonight too, is the first wave of feminism, which has been critiqued by social justice folks now. It was not really for women of color. It was for mainly white women,
Mm-hmm.
And then and it was about suffrage and being able to vote and having more political power, because before then, the only political power you had was whispering into the ear of the man that you were in a relationship with that had power. And we see this also in the movie Dangerous Beauty, which I know you and I both love that movie.
Mm-hmm.
And it talks about how it shows how, was it Italy or France? I can't remember what country it was based in.
It's in Italy.
Italy? Okay.
Right?
I think so. And it's the courtesans, and the courtesans, which are like the very high class, fancy prostitutes, and how they really created political change in that time through their clients by building these sexual relationships with their clients, but also by earning all of that money. That was the only way that women could really be independently wealthy at that time. And so even though it was very sexually shamed to be a courtesan, in some ways it was also, they were living the life that your average decent woman wasn't allowed to live, and she had to be with a man in order to have any power. She couldn't own land. She couldn't do all these things that courtesans were able to do with that power. And they were able to be in the company of groups of powerful men because they were they were the escort or whatever else. So it was interesting. It kind of makes you look at the roles that women have played throughout history a bit differently to watch that movie. So check it out, Dangerous Beauty, if you haven't seen it yet, anyone watching. And so anyway, the first wave of feminism might be giving women a little bit more political power. Then you get to like the third wave, which is the feminism that I was educated in. That's Gloria Steinem. That's when civil rights and women's rights joined. And then Gloria is fighting side by side with Black feminists, and it's all about more inclusion. In my master's program, I learned about the feminism of Dr. Bell Hooks, who's a Black lesbian Harvard professor, and her feminist critique, which was interesting coming from her intersectionality, I guess. And then fourth wave, I suppose, would be Me Too and that kind of movement. Fifth wave it's up for debate because people have different descriptions of it, but my understanding of it is reclaiming the feminine. So I talk to women who are boomers that were more of like Gloria Steinem's generation, and they say, Natasha, we didn't want to be seen as women. We wanted to be seen as human. Like we were not treated as humans. We were treated as objects as accessories or whatever else. We just wanted to be human. And so they wanted to prove that they could do everything a man could do again. But then women also have all this other responsibility in the home as well. Me growing up in the 90s, I felt like it was a lot of androgyny. Like I didn't want the gender roles. I wanted, let's both do all of it, kind of thing. But then putting that into practice in my marriage, it didn't really work out because society doesn't support that. So I was still carrying the extra load and brunt of the emotional labor, as well as the physical labor, as well as the income earning labor and all of that. So that didn't really work out so well for me. And then fifth wave feminism is understanding that our power is not the same. It's equal, but it's different. It's okay to fall into your femininity and your feminine energy and still have a world honor that as being powerful, as being strong. It's just in the way that we define strength. or the way that we define progress, or the way that we define success. And so fifth wave feminism to me is honoring the feminine and allowing you, if you want to be seen as human and you don't want to be seen as feminine, like you still attach to that, that's great. Fifth wave feminine says you are awesome, keep doing it. But also, if you want to wear a dress and like flirt with the mechanics and do some of these things that people think, like millennials will say, that's old fashioned, that's antiquated feminism. Oh no, it's feminism 5.0 that's the way that I see it. And it's so much fun. And then you and I have had these discussions over Instagram Messenger about how much fun we've had with these notions of being in our feminine, sometimes flirtatious energy, and playing with those superpowers.
Powerful. Right. Yeah. We said power at the same time in a little bit slightly different context, but like it's the same. And at the same time, like I've actually been contemplating what power means in terms of being a woman. And like, as women, I don't feel like we really like super identify with that power. We just express that. And we have this ability, I think, especially both you and I are mothers, right? So like we have a human being came through us. Like that's what is more powerful than that? I don't know. So, but it's not like we sit around like bragging about that or even identifying with it. It's just kind of like, okay, well, this is what we do. And I feel like that's the beauty of like the natural feminine strength and power is that it's just so like, it just is.
I'm so glad that you brought that up too, birth and even pregnancy, because again, we have in our country 6 weeks of maternity leave, which is crazy. I've read that it takes, and you know better than me because you're a physical therapist, but I've read that it can take up to 2 years for the pelvic floor and that whole area to properly heal after childbirth. And I know that 10 years after my first birth, I had gone to physical therapy and they told me I still hadn't fully healed all of that area, because we don't check women to see that everything went back to how it's supposed to, and we don't give her the rehabilitation either as vacation from work or actual health care to address some of the damage done, because that's a huge physical event, as well as growing a baby inside of you, but nobody sees it until they do. So they just don't know what you're going through. And that's, again, that quiet grace that I think that, again, you embody. And that's sort of a feminine quality. And we just expect women to go do the work and be awesome at it. And we do. We go to work, we're still awesome at it. And we're doing double, triple duty by growing a human inside of us without anybody even knowing about it. Yeah. And that is power. And that is amazing. And if you keep doing that, so I went through 2 births, almost 3 years apart, and I depleted my energy system. I ended up in adrenal fatigue because I kept doing it. So there are consequences to keep doing it. And if we build this society where we allow, or we have women do that, then they're losing their health, really. But what are the options? And then we can't go back to maybe not working or this old ancient system either, because then there's no guarantee that you're going to be financially supported if you divorce, or if your partner decides to, cheat and bounce, or which happens to a lot of women where they're raising babies without fathers. We can't control that. So it's like, how do you maintain your autonomy, your physical and financial safety, while not having to depend on another person, but still do the important work of growing the next generation of humans? And I feel like in our society, we don't honor that, and we don't respect that service, maybe let's say, that women are doing to grow the next generation. We don't look at it as providing enough of a safety net for her body to do that work beyond just that immediate relationship, which doesn't always work out, because you can't count on the man that you chose to be with to be able to be consistent.
And you and I know from experience.
We know from experience. Yeah.
Yes, we do. Yeah, I mean, you just touched on so many different things. First of all, we have this Diana said the lack of postpartum care is unacceptable, and I totally
Yeah,
agree.
that's true. Yeah,
Um,
Teresa Diana. Yeah.
ah,
Yeah.
Yay! Thank you
Thank
for
you for
that
joining,
comment.
Teresa. Yeah, she's got a little one at home,
Mm,
and she's got
mhm.
quite a story as well of
Yeah,
birth and after that she's
yeah,
posted about. So yeah.
yeah. So, I also had a not pretty traumatic, that's putting it lightly,
Mm,
birth story. And also, as being a physical therapist, I kind of was privy to it from the healthcare provider standpoint too, and kind of shocked, especially since I'm a pediatric provider first and foremost. So I mostly work with parents and I mostly work
hmm
with mothers.
hmm
And from my own experience, I vowed that, like, if I ever saw a woman, struggling, or, that I would also be very open about telling my story and the things that I
hmm
contend with. And I sometimes still do deal with the after effects now, almost 15 years later. I can't believe Claire's maybe 15. But
hmm
um, so that openness to talk about it is, to me, like a mission. And the more I talk about it, the more I have moms opening up about it, and having cathartic moments for themselves to be able to not feel so alone. Because I think that that's really what's going on, is there's so many of us that are just suffering in silence, and so many women are just, going through these humongous postpartum changes, and not only not receiving the medical care and the health care that they need, but also the support of sisters, and
hmm
kind of being like, I've been there and you're not alone, and get through this. And it was such a shock. So my vow was to always talk about it, and not to talk about it in a like squeamish way or ashamed way, and bring this also, it's like sense of like, okay, this is what happens, this is what
hmm
happened, and we will get through it. So
hmm
so that's one of the things that I was able to learn through that whole experience, is how we can really be there for each other. But yeah, like whether it's maternity policies, um, for either leave and or pay. I think that it's really important for fathers to be involved too in the immediate postpartum period, and
Absolutely.
giving,
Support
both
person.
parents a chance to bond
hmm
is super important and very overlooked here in the US. And it's just so unfortunate. I think it does have a massive societal impact. That first year, especially, I feel, and that's exactly my wheelhouse. I specialize in babies and toddlers. I do early intervention. So, the physical part aside, the motor skills aside, like, it's really, I feel like I'm helping parents to hold space and bond with their children through movement, and being playful, and things like that. But the main rationale is, to me anyway, is not the motor piece, but it's the bonding and the relationship and the
hmm
fun, and the that interaction is so important. So and that part of it is overlooked as well. In general too, talking about like the changes that we go through physically as women, but there's a huge psycho-spiritual change that happens as well, and it is not honored as a rite of passage. But that is pretty much across the board in the US. It's like we don't really value rites of passages very much, whether it's other ceremonies, or parts of life, but especially birth. Like, it's just kind of like, oh, okay, that's what happened. A baby was born.
Yeah,
And
popped it
there's
out,
so
go
much
back to
more.
work.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a huge shift. And I wanted to speak to what you said too about how you made a vow to be open to talk about your experiences. This follower that I spoke to earlier today too had said that she appreciates how on the show we share things as women that her intuition is feeling, that she's feeling, but she hasn't been able to put into words yet. And so to
Mm.
listen to the show, it's been validating to her. And when we bring up this conversation, then it allows the experiences of women to be known, and
Yeah.
so it's validating the women that have had those experiences, and it's educating maybe the men or other women that haven't had some of those experiences. And I to bring it back to pop culture, even the song WAP, which has been very controversial. And I mean, that could be a whole episode in and of itself. But one piece that I was thinking about today, because this has been a theme today, is just Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion singing about that sensation of what a woman goes through is really, really important. And people are losing their minds because all they see is like, oh, it's so sexual, or so like in your face, or vulgar, or whatever else. But you know what? It's your natural body. That's what happens when things are going right. So how many women are experiencing things going right in their sex lives, in the bedroom, and they might not even know that they might not have reached that point, or at least not in many, many years, because things are not going right in their bedroom. So they need to hear songs like that. It's not about objectifying men. It's not about putting men down. It's not about just being shocking people and trying to be as sexy as possible. It's about sharing a very real, highly natural, beautiful, powerful, fun experience, and making it and normalizing it in our culture. Because how many times, how many decades have we had to listen to guys sing about their dicks and like what they're going to do with it, and how they want to shove money down our pants, and like come and do this to his dick and all of this stuff, but women can't sing about their wet ass pussy? I just have a problem with that. And I think that they are doing a public service by normalizing that expression, whether or not you're a woman that feels you need to express it in that way. There's many women that are like, I don't need to do all that. Like, I don't need to do all that publicly. Awesome. Good for you. I respect that and honor that so much. And just knowing now that you can is a little more freeing.
Well, we don't really talk about like what good quality sex is, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like that's not a conversation that's had.
Right.
So,
well, you and I talk about it.
Well, you and I talk about it a lot.
Yeah, but we don't talk about it as a culture. Yeah, and that's again another reason for this.
It's a taboo subject.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, and there's so many people that suffer in silence, and I do believe that this postpartum thing has a lot to do with it, because, I can say that partially the reason why I'm divorced is because of changes in sexuality. So it's unfortunate, and I wish I had better resources at the time. I didn't, and now I know. But I think a lot of people, on both sides, men and women, do struggle with that, and there's not a lot of certainly not mainstream resources for seeking out that kind of support. And it's not about like toys and lube and stuff. Like that's kind of like,
it's not about toys and lube, and it's not about like giving it to your husband or giving it to your wife, because that's not it. It's about it being mutually pleasurable for both of you, because then that's the glue. But if just sex alone is not the glue, but having pleasurable, enjoyable sex, both sides, is the glue. I feel like to a relationship, I cannot say how important that is to a successful relationship, and which is why I talk about this as a marriage and family therapist.
Yeah, it's such an important topic, and I actually feel like it's one of the most important topics for us to really discuss. And again, like I'm just not sure why it's become so taboo, and people just kind of whisper behind closed doors, if they even speak to it, so and have it just be more of a matter of fact, an accepted conversation, that you don't have to go off and like, in more kind of like edgy ways in order to get support. I think it should be much more of a accessible resources and conversations and support. So yeah.
Well, and that's why I appreciate the Cardi B's of the world, and she's putting herself out there for the slaughter, to take all the bullets first.
She has.
Yeah. So that the rest of us can be like, oh, Cardi did it, so this is becoming normal now. And then we have like an easier way, But I appreciate that about her. And she had a quote, and I don't want to make it sound like she's this big hero either, because she has some not so high integrity things in her past. As everyone does. Yeah. I mean, I mentioned like Kobe earlier, be fair. and she has this, from what I hear, I haven't looked too much into it, but a history of when she was a sex worker, drugging men and stealing wallets or whatever else. So I can't speak on that too much, but I'm not promoting that. I'm not saying that's anything powerful or divine feminine or whatnot. But she did say, when I was a young mother, I could have taken welfare, but you shame me for that. And so instead I jumped on the pole and I supported my family, but you still shame me for that. So you can't win.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, either way, I wasn't going to win. I was going to be shamed, and it was a lot more fun to jump on the pole and make some money. I have mad respect for that, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I want to check in to see, we've got a few people here now. If you guys have questions, anything you want to add, please feel free to pipe in, say something, keeping an eye on the comments as we move along. Brandy's laughy facing us. Yeah, Brandy knows what's up too. And also, Michelle, I realized that my volume popped up again, so I turned it all the way down. So I wanted to see.
Doing that too?
I don't know. You might want to check it because it sounds like there's a slight echo. Just check it on your phone.
It won't actually let me go all the way down. That's so weird.
It might be okay though if it's down. Okay. It always wants to like auto adjust and keep creeping up. But yeah, it's all right. So yeah, that is one aspect. So we have, so far we've talked about the divine feminine as mother, birthing and the sacrifices physically that she makes. We've talked about the divine feminine as moving through tremendous obstacles with grace and people not knowing it. We've talked about the divine feminine as this bold, in your face wop, and trailblazer, sacrificial lamb kind of divine feminine. They're all powerful. And I think it's important as women, now I'm talking not just about the feminine, but women, that we aren't splitting each other and because our way of expressing or our way of embodying that divine feminine looks a little bit different from our sisters. And that we're allowing space for everyone, because if we do that, the world will, because guess what? We are 51% of the population. There's no reason for us to be oppressed or not held as equally powerful on the throne of the earth.
Mm-hmm. Well, we were talking before about, you brought up the movie Dangerous Beauty, and the courtesan archetype, which really, when I think about a courtesan, I kind of resonate with the geisha archetype since I'm half Japanese. And I've actually looked into that and what that was like historically for women and for men and culturally, just because it's a personal interest of mine. But, that archetype is actually it's not very looked highly upon, I guess, because I think it kind of gets lumped into the selling of sex, which it foundationally is not, but it's been lumped into that category. So yeah, it's just thinking about how archetypally too, things have changed and we can have these conversations now and be able to have the fullness of the expression, and that the pendulum swings. So I don't talk about the mop and the bucket that I need, but
I know about your mop and bucket. I mean, not personally, but just witnessing the divine conversations. Yes, that I'm like, oh, Michelle.
Yeah.
Keep talking.
Too funny. But the pendulum swings, and we whether it's more of a trickster archetype or bringing in it allows for expression and it allows for the full expression. So I honor that and I appreciate that, because it makes it that much easier for us to have this conversation and be lighthearted and joke about it. So
yeah, and just, it feels good when you and I share anecdotes or experiences or whatever. I think it juices us both up. We're like, woo, that's exciting. Now I have more energy for my day. And that's that spiritual sexual energy that I'm talking about with the show too, to get that going. I am super excited because now when I've gone into some social circles, I'm being introduced as the squirting lady because
that's a great way to be introduced.
I was like, really? That's why I'm like, I love this. I'm loving this introduction now because of my show on squirting, right? And that everybody loved that episode. And so they're like, oh, this is Natasha. This is the squirting. I'm like, hey, but just having that be open and have people like be excited about it. It's like people are still kind of quiet about it online, but then in person you talk to them like, oh, they're like all excited. And it's energizing. It gives you some it just feels powerful to be in that energy.
Yeah. And how far we've come, right? Like in terms of being able to talk about it and, we can talk, you and I have geeked out about like kind of the mechanics of it and like what it is and like the science behind it and all that kind of stuff, right? And then of course, like there's the energetics and there's the polarity and then there's the relational part and bringing that all in, like we've come so far from like this kind of clinical Ruth Westheimer. Remember her? I
was just thinking about her today. I can't believe it. As I was getting dressed, I put this on. I'm like, this is kind of Dr. Ruth like. I'm like, I used to watch Dr. Ruth and I was like, she is so eccentric and she just talks so openly. I love her. And I'm like, I think a little piece of me knew that one day I was destined to be talking about, I was going to talk about sex education. Yeah, I knew it. Even from a young age. Mm-hmm.
That's great. It's so funny that we invoked her.
Oh,
we brought her into this space.
Or she just is like, hey, I'm gonna be there tonight. I was one of the trailblazers.
Yeah, but her embodiment was like, she was just very like matter of fact and clinical and like, I wouldn't say cold about it, but there was this like kind of just like,
she would joke sometimes too. She would throw little jokes.
But she was more kind of like I thought of her more as just kind of like a grandma type too, like that, Whereas like you bring in this kind of like potent juiciness that's a different embodiment of this.
Oh yeah. I hear what you're saying. And it's so interesting that you say that too, because I was in another friend circle where I had met some of the friends of their friends. And I made this comment because again, I got introduced as like the squirting expert or something like that. And I was like, I'm not a sex worker. And then they're like, you aren't? And I was like, and they're like, there's nothing wrong with sex workers. And I was like, oh no, I'm a huge sex worker advocate, but I'm not a sex worker. I talk about it and I have a show on it. And they're like, well, then aren't you a sex worker? And I'm like, I guess I am. I guess I am kind of a sex worker because I'm not having sex. That's in fact very much a no-no as an ethical guideline of the work that I do. And it's not, I wouldn't make that jump anyway, but I am definitely having those intimate conversations. And there's an actual sexual, I don't want to say it's an orientation, but maybe a preference called sapiosexual, which is you get turned on by mental stimulation. And in my profession, I was warned about this in my training and I've experienced it where my clients we have intimate conversations and they mistake that for physical sexual attraction and then have asked me to date them after they've been my client. And I say, no, I can't do that, and it's an interesting dynamic, but I know where it's coming from. They might not be aware that that's sort of a typical thing that can happen because it's energy and it's a very intimate, you're having these intimate conversations. It's not that far off from a physically intimate because you can have physical intimacy without this emotional, energetic intimacy and vice versa, but it's still a very intimate space. And even before I started talking and focusing more on sex and sexuality in my career, I was always about intimacy. Even when I worked with kids, it was like I worked with teenagers and I prided myself on being able to get myself in there where nobody else could, to talk about these things so that we could actually start to do the healing work. So for me, I can't live without intimacy. Intimacy is my jam. It's all about intimacy. I can only go deep. I can't stay at the surface.
Yeah, I share that too. I mean, I work in the physical realm. I'm a physical therapist, but in terms of now 20 years into my career, I realized that I went into it because I really was wanting to do a deep dive into relationships. And I feel like relationships are really foundational. The relationships are everything. So,
Yeah.
you know, and the relationship to our body is a huge primary driver in the way that we express ourselves in the world. So, you know, wanting to kind of like dig around in that, and then how that then bubbles out into relating with other human beings. So, yeah, so it's so interesting. Like we came at it from different angles, but we study and are, you know, researchers and teachers about very similar topics.
100%. And I love collaborating and connecting with people who are experts of the body. Even men that I've dated a lot of athletes because they're very much in their physicality, in their body. And I feel like because I'm very much kind of in my head and in my mind and this deep thinker, I appreciate having that balance in a friendship and a business partner and a lover, whatever else. And I do tend to gravitate toward people that, like yourself, are some form of body worker, because then we connect. We have a definite bridge where we're on the same page, but we're coming, like you said, coming at it from a different side. Absolutely. And it's important, and it inspires me to be more in my body. I mean, for me, I don't strive to have to be more intellectual or strive to be more spiritual. It's like, for me, I'm always trying to ground that into the body. And there's so much talk, especially even with this election and all the changes that are going on of like 5D and going into 5D reality. But the reality is we're still straddling, you know, like this physical world and the spiritual world. And so we can't just discard the physical world while we are here in these bodies. It's about bringing that, you know, 5D into our physicality and having the best of both of those worlds, rather than like, oh, we're done with that. Because it's like you're living simultaneously, right, in all these dimensions, and expressing that.
For sure. And that to me is like what it means to be a human, and an optimized human, is to be able to hold those paradoxes. They're absolutely paradoxical. But to be able to hold that and be here now and be of service to others, and while also holding that like connection to source. And
connection to source. And what's coming up for me too is this image keeps coming up of the clitoris, which is, so I've been having so much fun with this because I have a very good friend who will be on the show at one point in time. She was going through Layla Martin's sex coaching program. Where a lot of what they learn is, and Layla Martin's work is amazing, but a lot of what they learn is the erotic anatomy. And she said, I'm really passionate about teaching women just about their anatomy, because once they bring their intention and attention to that anatomy, energy starts to flow there, and they start having, you know, better sex and a better body awareness and more appreciation, more body confidence, all of that. And so she sort of inspired me to pay more attention to that. And then I had the squirting episode with Habib, and he wrote this beautiful book called Kunyaza, Habib Akande, and he goes a lot into anatomy and that too. And then I stumbled across this YouTube video that was 2 minutes, and I posted it in my story a couple of weeks ago, but it talks about, you know, the clitoris as being has just as much erectile tissue as the penis. It's just as big as the penis. It's just mostly internal. And so the only part that is external that we see is this little nub, which is the tip of the clitoris. That's the only part that's exposed. Everything else is internal. But we assume that, you know, Freud talked about penis envy, that women are inadequate just because it's like we don't see. And it goes with the divine feminine too, as we underestimate her power. We underestimate her strength because it's all invisible. You know, she's growing a baby inside of her erectile tissue, which has twice as many nerve endings as his, and which is only built for pleasure, nothing else, is mostly internal in her body. And most people do not know how to work that, not only that little love button, the tip, they don't know how to work that, let alone the rest of it internally. And here I am, I'll be 44 in a couple months. I have 3 degrees in psychology, sexuality. I've taken many courses on human sexuality. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I'm still learning about my erotic anatomy. Like, that's the culture that we're living in. Even as I put myself out as an educator, I'm still learning about my body, right? And so how exciting is that? But we start to see those parallels between the physical and the energetic and the emotional.
Absolutely. It's fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think one of the books that you had on your mantle, it might still be there too, was the multi-orgasmic woman. And then maybe there was a squirting one too. I'm trying to remember.
Oh yeah, I've had that. I've had all those books, I think, since you were here. Yeah, and I realize we are almost out of time on Instagram. We can keep going on YouTube Live. So if you all are enjoying this conversation, because it sounds like it's just starting to get good right now, you can join us over on YouTube, and we'll keep going for as long as we need to, because that's what the feminine does.
Yes. We're very non-linear.
Very nonlinear. You have to. I heard a man say this, a very feminine, balanced man, but he said, when you're having these deep conversations, they have to be nonlinear. They have to be circular, because that's how they happen. You have to go into the depth. So join us over on YouTube, and I hope to see you again next week with another topic on the divine masculine with Shofar Graves. So thank you everyone for joining in. We'll see you soon. Okay, so that's ending there.
All right.
Oh man, and so it's our choice whether we want to keep with the headphones or we don't. We can take them off now if you're more comfortable with them off. It's your choice.
Okay, I'll probably leave it on.
Okay. Yeah. So the erotic anatomy as metaphor for the energetics of the feminine, and again, this fifth wave feminine, where you can embrace your femininity because you don't have to prove yourself anymore. It's like we are the early feminists. I don't want to say that they got it wrong, because they didn't. They were the building blocks, just like early tribal societies were the building blocks to where we're at now. There's periods of regression and progression for sure, but here we are. We can be in our feminine and be proud of our feminine, because it's not looked as lesser than in the cutting edge, we'll say, because I know there's still a portion of the population that will view the feminine as weaker. And this is why we don't like the word pussy, as it really irritates me that you can say, oh, you're such a pussy, but if you say pussy in relation to your actual power, that's censored, and that people are like, oh, that's such a vulgar word. But you had no problem with it rolling off your lips when you were describing somebody being weak. Yes. How is it different now, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So interesting. And language is really important. I feel like that's an overlooked part of our society too. Is, growing up in Japan and having Japanese as being my first language. There's a very strong sense in the Japanese language and culture about how words actually have vibration. So I think I kind of unconsciously have brought that into my general sense of words, and how important it is that we choose our words wisely and use them wisely. So yeah, it's just so interesting how that could roll off the tongue as an epithet towards somebody to actually what you just said, to indicate their weakness or their lack of strength. It doesn't make any sense, really. But we can't speak to it from, either an anatomical or a
power position.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest problem. Even with transgender things, I think the reason people have a problem with transgender folks is because how dare they be feminine? How dare they want to be a woman when a woman is less than, or how dare they want to be a man when they're only just a woman? I think that's the problem that some people have. Yeah, how dare you think that you can be something that you're not, kind of thing. And it's very subtle, I think, but I've done a lot of thinking about this. And I mean, it's just a theory. I could be wrong, hypothesis, but it's a notion of how we relate to the feminine. And then another metaphor I'd like to bring up is right before we made the switcheroo from Instagram, you were talking about the multi-orgasmic woman. And so when we're talking about masculine energy, feminine energy, whether it's man and woman, masculine, feminine in either body, a man can be multi-orgasmic for sure. But it's more common, I think, that once he ejaculates, he's out for the count for a while, whereas women, after the first one, the rest get easier. It's like, okay, now they're coming faster if you just keep going. But
That was just a warm up.
Yeah, that was just a warm up. Exactly. Oh, you worked for that first one, but now they're just gonna, they're gonna roll in. But we don't even get to that point because most men and women don't know how to create that first one even. Right? We don't take the time.
Yeah. And the paradox is, if you, I feel in my experiences, if you have this goal-oriented idea about orgasm, in that it's a finish line, which I feel is just kind of this programmed conditioning around sex, then that's what happens. But once you shift your attitude of like, oh, this is just if it's just the beginning, it could be like there's a whole host of other things that could happen. So
and speaking of pleasure, I had to take my headphones off.
Yeah. Oh, your ears are so rad.
I was trying to get pinched, and I was like, I can't get pleasure, and then feeling this this pressure. You can still hear me, okay?
Yeah, it's good.
Even with that, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So not like, how do we break free from that cultural program? Because there's so many, we have to really be mindful. And I don't say like, I don't mean like break free just to be reckless from programs, but be mindful about the programs that are running and say, hey, is this working out for me? Or is there a better way that I could do things, or a more enjoyable way that might serve me and the planet, me and my relationship, or me and my family better? And I think that's really important. And so when we start to, that's the first step. And then we start to experience things like becoming multi-orgasmic, because it's possible. Or we want to even just to be exploring and saying, what is possible? And that's me. Like, I am so excited for my next relationship so that I can explore what else is possible. You know, there's only so much that you can really explore. You have certain freedoms on your own, but then it's like next level.
It is. And the thing that really isn't spoken to too, and I would love to speak to this more, is like, it's such a dynamic relationship too. So, you just said that you're just about to turn 44. Our birthdays are pretty close together. So I'm about to be 49 next year.
Wow. Well done.
I know. So, like, the relationship to our bodies changes. Hormones certainly change. Attitudes totally change. And like all those things combined, like it's a constant moving target. So the moment you feel like, oh, I've kind of like got this down, all of a sudden something shifts and it's all new again. So, and that to me is exciting. I love that dynamic aspect of, again, like, I feel like the feminine is there's the fluidity and the constant change and being okay with that.
Those are the qualities that we want in the world right now, because we're being shocked and surprised and things are changing. And we want that feminine energy that's like, okay, here we go. We're used to these changes. We're used to puberty, menopause, pregnancy. It's like our body's we're always in flux. Our emotions are in flux. Our hormones are in flux. And we think that women can't be leaders. Like, we are primed for these conditions right now, right? That are happening in the world. And even again, with the multi-orgasmic thing, we're not done after just one hurrah. We just keep going and going and going. And if the conditions are right, like if we get enough of our self-care and our rest, when it's not right, we're not functioning either sexually or in any capacity. We're like, no, my body says no. And then when the alignment's there and it's like go time, we're like, and have this massive endurance. So
for sure,
there's so many
and
parallels.
we do. And then we see how important having, not just having sex, but having quality sex and sexual experiences and connection with our partners can have a massive effect on our lives, on our energy. And that has a ripple effect out into society too. Like, it would be a better place if people were having more and more quality.
Oh man, I mean, it sounds like at first glance when you say that, it sounds so. I know a lot of people like, what are they talking about? There's bigger things. There's more important things to deal with right now. But that's the problem, is the sex is the first thing to go under stress. So if we made it a priority to manage our stress and to keep our sex life juicy, that's what you're saying, the sensual dancing and even little things like that. That's how we do it alone, even without a partner, to keep that going. It's really important, because then we are winning the battle against stress. We're staying calm, we're staying grounded, we're keeping in our flow, we're keeping in our creativity. Even today, I post my workouts a lot, and I'm sure people are probably sick of them already because I do them like 2 or 3 times a week, and I'll usually like post a clip, and it's, you know, always booty shaking or like hip circles or whatever, but I try to add like a little psychoeducation with it. And, you know, I did lots of different variations because there's like this intense twerk out episode on this app that I use on fitness. And yeah, that's, it's not about, I'm not just trying to show my ass off to the world. It's really like, I want to, first of all, normalize that we can make these movements in public and it feels good, and what it's doing for us internally, you know, our emotions and loosening up our body and getting that energy. And even, you know, that second and third chakra, that's confidence, third chakra, and then second chakra, energy, power, money, sex, abundance. It's like welcoming that in. And I think that's really important to not be shaming those movements. That's what we need right now.
We do. And thank you so much for speaking to like the whole like self-care practices and personal practices. And, you know, like this isn't stuff that you just work on when you are in a relationship and working on it with your partner. Like, in fact, what you bring to the table there, it like has a huge foundation on what you do in your day-to-day life to take care of those things on your own, mostly. And whether it is like kind of tapping into the natural, like sensual movements in our bodies and feeling that and allowing ourselves to be taken away by, you know, a good drum beat song and moving our bodies in a very organic way. And that moves energy in a certain way, and that juices us up. And like honoring those, the kind of tried and true methods of keeping that energy moving within us. Like we do have that responsibility. And also like being able to have open conversations, and that comes with being able to speak openly with a girlfriend about this stuff, and being, it's important because that's the springboard for being able to have those frank and like sometimes challenging but necessary conversations with a partner about sexuality and likes and dislikes and what works and what doesn't, and what might work today might be different tomorrow because I'm on a different part of my cycle. And, you know, like we have these, again, these natural ebbs and flows through life that are nothing, it's nothing wrong. Right. Like I'm pretty attuned to my menstrual cycle and the effect that it has on my sexual expression and desires, and also my abilities. Like sometimes it's really hard for me to have an orgasm. Other times it's way easier, and I can, you know, and that's all information that helps your lover be a better lover to you. So it's like, there's nothing wrong if you didn't, you know, not please me today. Or it's like, this is where I'm at, and it's a reality, and we can do other things.
Continue. There's one thing.
So that being able to have those conversations are super important. And I don't think that there's much, there was a show that I watched, like either a preview or like the first couple of minutes, and I don't know what it was. I mean, I don't know if it was on Netflix or whatever. And I don't watch very much TV, so it's kind of surprising that I saw this, but I wish I knew what it was. But it was a adult show, and there was a woman that was engaging with a man, and she ended up going to the restroom after they had a sexual encounter, and she was taking care of herself. And then in the episode, the guy comes in, and like it ends up becoming a huge blowout fight.
He was threatened.
Because he was threatened, but also she was resentful. So there was zero meeting of the, you know,
no
like
connection.
So he was resentful and like upset, and almost kind of disgusted actually in finding her doing that, which I thought was really sad. And then like she was like pissed because he wasn't really, you know, engaging with her and like helping her to maximize her pleasure. So, you know, there was the aspect of her taking care of it herself, but that ended up becoming a resentful thing. And like, I remember like saying to the TV screen, like, why didn't you just talk about it? Like that was like a 5-minute conversation and everything would have been fine. Like, I don't understand why that
Well, because if they're already
there.
getting upset about it, they probably don't have the capacity to have that conversation, right? That's why they ended up in that place in the first place. And not everybody is open enough in those vulnerable spaces, because our sexuality is such a vulnerable thing. And you and I have talked about this before, about how people go through like a weekend seminar of something, and then they put themselves out there as teachers without having the skill and the credentials to hold space and be in boundaries and safety in those vulnerable spaces. So I think in general, nobody really teaches us to do that until we happen to get training through maybe a profession or client work. Like you're a health professional, I'm a health professional, so we get that sort of training. But it's being with people in their vulnerability. And I also wanted to, the thing that I wanted to loop back with, now that we're talking a bit about men and women too, in heterosexual encounters, when we spoke about men not always being there for their partners, or I wanted to clarify too, if anybody's still with us this late into the conversation, is that I don't want that to sound like blaming men, because I feel like men are set up in this society, because I want to make it clear that we're talking about the cultural dynamics and the systemic dynamics that put all that pressure on the man in certain ways. And it puts a lot of pressure then on the woman as well in those family situations. And you and I are understanding of this after going through our own, betrayals and pain and all of these other things. We, and doing a lot of thinking, processing, healing about that, have come around full circle and want to speak in advocacy for women, but not as putting men down, or not, we're not about shaming men, because there's no power in that. It's really about honoring them so that they can pull up and come with us as we rise as well. And I wanted to say a little bit about, well, two things. One, I want to talk a little bit about, share a story about how you engage with the masculine, because I think it's really beautiful, the way that you take men in, and just enjoy their manliness. The way that you even describe your process of enjoying that is really beautiful. And I haven't quite heard that described in the same way from any other women that I've talked to. And then also I wanted to mention that, I was talking about the workouts and the hip circles, and you're saying being able to share openly with our sisters. My workout partner is also a single mama, a juicy single mama like us. And she and I have so much fun doing those workouts together and shaking our booties and doing the twerkouts. And neither one of us is really dating right now. And neither one of us really feels the desire, or maybe not doesn't feel the desire, but doesn't feel the need. Like it's not, we can kind of take it or leave it, because we're having so much juicy, like intimate, playful connection with our own, let's say, turn on is the word that Mama Gina would use, right? That we're not looking for that outside of ourselves. We're not looking for that in a man. And so therefore a man can't disappoint us. A man can't.
And that's super powerful too, because then that's like a no pressure situation. And you spoke to the pressure a couple of minutes ago about how, like, I think on both sides, men and women feel this like enormous pressure to be a certain way and to perform a certain way. And like that takes away so much. But you and your own like sovereignty, you're taking care of yourself, you're receiving that juiciness, circulating it,
energy,
and circulating it within yourself, as well as like kind of synergizing with a sister and doing things like those kind of practices, those feminine practices that help us to cultivate that energy. And I think from like an anti-aging, I don't want to use that term, but it's kind of a thing, right? Especially being in our 40s.
Yeah.
I know ads that come up on my Facebook feed.
Say my age, because I'm like, I don't want my body to remember.
But
I'm proud of my age, my wisdom years too.
Yeah. So it's a really interesting paradox to be a woman of this age, especially now. I see pictures of my mom when she was the same age, and she looks so much older than we do as being in our 40s. And you know, it's just it's a different time, and we have such an opportunity. And just like you said, like, I think we tell our bodies what is going on, and you know, sometimes I have to like literally think about like, oh my gosh, I'm pretty close to being 50 years old, and that's kind of cool in a body like this, and you know, feeling tremendous. And so
grateful to people like J-Lo and some of the other.
Oh yeah, I mean, you and I have talked
very,
about her, and especially like just the way that she carries herself through the world, like is I find her to be a huge role model.
Absolutely. And it's not just about looking youthful. It's about it's about maintaining youthfulness. It's not about the looking of it. The looks just go along with the energy of it, and maintaining that zest and that life, and not just accepting a mediocre downslide each year, you know. And I have a dear friend in my PhD program. She's a nurse practitioner, and now she's got a PhD in mind body medicine. But she says, Natasha, if we're not improving our body every year, then we're declining, you know. So she's really into kind of like the kickboxing, and she does all the pelvic floor exercises, making sure that, you know, the Kegels are going and all of that stuff, just to maintain that level of juiciness, I guess, all the way around. And yeah, super, super inspiring. And
that's our responsibility. And it's, I mean, it's also I consider it to be like, I'm so privileged to know what I know about the human body, and have been so interested in it all this time, that like, it's kind of my wheelhouse. Same thing with you. Like, you know, the things that you need to do as an individual, as well as you know, a woman in this society, that help you to keep that vitality and that radiance. And that has everything to do with the internal process. It's not something that it gets reflected on the external, but it really comes from within.
And I've had several people say to me, at least 4 people in the last couple of months, like, Natasha, your energy is so different. Like, I'm just experiencing you differently. Like, you just seem like you're so, I don't know, like happy, or, you know, they just say different. Like, you just feel, your energy feels lighter, kind of thing. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. Like, and I'm noticing that several people have been saying this, and so I'm like, okay, what's changed? And like, yeah, I did a couple of Reiki sessions. Those were really cool. Like, I got to visit my family and go home and mend some relationships and build some relationships. That was really cool. And then it dawned on me, I'm like, I haven't been dating.
Wow.
That's part of it, because I'm like you said, I'm cultivating that juiciness and my vitality, and that, you know, what do you want to call it, libido or life force energy, all on my own. And I'm harvesting it and recycling it and amplifying it, and harvesting and recycling and amplifying it, and there's no leaks. I'm not leaking it to anyone, because I'm not dating. And it's not like I'm not trying not to date. I'm just not putting any effort into it, because I've been really tasked to keep the plane in the air in this COVID reality. And I've been having a lot of fun with this show and this creative project, and that's really important to me. I've been finishing my PhD dissertation. That's very important to me. And I have a tremendous circle of friends that have me feeling loved and nourished. And I'm not really needing of anything. And I thought, and I know this, I won't be in this place forever, but it's really been interesting that I'm so happy and so content. And I have people, you know, commenting even on it. And I'm like, wow, there's no one just kind of coming by and trying to take my energy without replenishing it.
Yeah, there's something to be said for, you know, I mean, you and I have children that are similar ages. I have one, but our girls are similar ages, and like, and it's so interesting. Like, I feel like I've achieved this level of freedom in being a woman, and also being a mother in my life. That's just really like incredible. And that really, I think that feeling of freedom really reverberates in just the way that I am out in the world, just like you said. So then other people see it, right?
Yeah, and also that feeling of being completely in your feminine power in that way, and feeling really juiced up. And if you're okay to talk about it, I want to, since it's Mercury retrograde, let's retrograde back to this time last year, when you and I were really like aligned, and we were just feeling very juicy, feeling a lot of love energy, and we both attracted incredible partners into our life. And mine was short lived because we were on different paths, but it was a beautiful, beautiful experience. And you're still with your partner. And in that process, before you chose just one, because I know you had plenty of options as a very vibrant, beautiful, intelligent, woman. I remember it just seemed like I was so loving your messages because it seemed like every week there was a new man falling in love with you. Like,
what's happening?
Goddess. Yes. Like, that's so awesome. And so, we would debrief some of your dates or whatever else. And you would get so excited just about witnessing his masculinity, right? Whoever it was, any man that you decided to go out with, and I'm not saying, you were choosy about who, intentional about who you go out with, but any man that you decide to go out with, I remember you describing one man's jawline. You're like, I was just at dinner with him and I was noticing his jawline, and I just loved it. The angle of his jaw and this, and just like the way that he smells. And it was just like this true appreciation for his manliness that was really even very attractive for me to witness. So I can only imagine how he must have felt saturating in your energy. And no wonder every man that went out with you was falling in love.
They didn't all fall in love with me, but
it seemed like it to I think in fact, I think some of them that probably disappeared were like, whoa, she's too much. Like she's next level. I don't think I could handle that for maybe a week. But I would have to like get a graduate degree in sensuality to
That's so funny. It was fun. It was just a lesson to me in like complete non-attachment to outcome, and it was my way of like really once and for all, like deprogramming myself from the whole like white knight fairy tale, fantasy of relationships. It's just insidious. It's like constant. It's like a drumbeat in a girl and woman's ear, like just constantly. It's like, this is what it's supposed to look like.
Disney movies, man, they ruined it.
Ruined. So it was my like turn to just embody and experience without, and being open to like whatever came. Like I had the confidence to just be like, I can handle anything that comes my way. And that came with whether you want to call it age or experience or whatever, but like, I don't think I could have been able to do that even a couple of years ago. But like, I just was at a point where I was just like, you know what, I'm fine. I'm good. Like, it really does not matter what happens here. Taking it as complete learning experience and learning about myself first and foremost. And also just being in that space of really diving into my femininity so I can, like you said, appreciate the masculine in all of their forms and their beautiful expressions, and being okay with all of it. So it was really so fun, and I learned so much. And it was fun to share it with you because you and I were like exchanging lots of messages about what was going on.
Yeah, I love those updates. I was like living for them. I was like, yes, like I love it. I don't have the time to be out there dating. I just love hearing the stories. Because so often, especially like with my clients or some of my other friends, you just hear all these women complaining about the dating apps.
And a lot.
Dating experiences. And it's not that the women themselves are bad. It's just that they're not fully realizing maybe the potential or how they do have power to either one, get out of abort mission if it's not the right energy.
Totally.
Or because I know there are some circumstances like that with you too, where you're like, oh nope, I'm out of here kind of thing. Or how to be in that place of not taking a self-esteem hit because of somebody else's behavior. I mean, we can wonder. I think it speaks to our humility and being humble is like, did I do something, or am I, a little off or whatnot? But also realizing a lot of times after, checking in with a friend or whatever about it, oh no, that was his stuff or his behavior, that was, he's still working on. And I feel like you and I both, when we've had unsettling experiences with men, they do tend to loop back around at some point in the future and give us some kind of resolution. So that's,
Mm-hmm.
and that speaks to us also as women to be not so rigid that we're like, nope, I'm done with you. Like I wrote you off, but being open to maybe not another relationship, but at least a conversation about what went wrong and what we might have liked better in that situation.
Yeah, I think that, having the openness to have that conversation, sometimes very difficult conversations, but conversations nonetheless for like kind of feedback in both directions is important. And I think that's kind of lost in this like swipe left, right dating world of like, oh, the date didn't go well and I'm just going to ghost. I think a lot of those kind of things are very prevalent right now. And I feel like if we can just kind of let go of those, common
just
practices.
Next level objectification. It's just like continuing.
Yeah, it can go both ways.
In
Totally.
the tech world. Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. So, just treating it as a learning opportunity, and, like, just like we did before we came on this live, you set this beautiful intention for us to be able to channel whatever needed to come through in this moment, and being in a complete surrender and being open. I feel like if you set the intention as you're joining a dating app and putting your profile photos together and all the little blurbs and stuff, depending on what app you're using, if you set the intention of what you are doing, whether it's, being open and curious to meet new people, or, I'm looking for my life partner and that's the line I'm setting. And, there's no judgment about that. People are looking for that, and that's okay. But I think if people, and not just women, but if people, men and women, take a moment to do that before they created their profiles, it probably would have different results.
Absolutely. And you're talking again about these qualities of the divine feminine that can serve the planet right now. And you said before, microcosm, macrocosm, it's always happening simultaneously. So here you're using this feminine quality of surrender, which is receiving. Again, you can always go back to these sexual metaphors too. We're built with the anatomy to receive. There's an amount of surrender. If we can learn how to do that without a partner, we can actually receive more, right? If we learn how to surrender. And you're talking about surrendering by letting go of outcomes too. So you're going on these dates, letting go of outcomes. You're slowing it down and being intentional about your dating profile before you just go out there and go on the hunt for someone. And then you see how this relates to the macrocosm here on the planet, because we're surrendering to the unknown. We don't know what's happening right now. We can be sure of ourselves, be sure of our self-worth, but also surrender to let something come through that we don't even know yet, that could be bigger and better than we could ever have imagined. And we can't receive that until we surrender and unattach ourselves from these limited notions or outcomes that we have in our mind. And as I'm saying that, I can see my dream board, my vision board from here with like the gold sparkles around it, but I'm not attached to that outcome. It's just fun to play with possibility. And I'm like, oh, when is it going to manifest? And sure enough, I'm looking at all these like tropical photos with these blue waters, and what has manifested for me is a trip to Tulum next month. And nice. I'm like, there it is. All I had to do was just surrender and see what would happen.
Yeah.
And if it didn't, then something else. But as far as moving through transformation, we've talked about the strength and flexibility, and even these booty shaking workouts that I'm doing. Like we're doing like these twerk tutorials. It's like these pelvic floor, these core workouts. Where at one point she had us like, with our arm, like kind of in downward dog and doing like a hip shake, but then like one hand up. And I was like, dang, like this was so hard. My arms were jelly. I could barely even move my body anymore. The amount of strength and stability, but yet flexibility that is required for those workouts is intense. It doesn't look like much. Again, like the clitoris doesn't look like much from the outside. It looks like you're just trying to turn a man on or whatever else, but that's not the point of it. It's really to build this inner strength and to have this really powerful workout. And how does that again translate then, to preparing your core foundation and your foundation of your life, like we were talking about earlier, with simplifying, getting rid of things, being light on our feet, being flexible, mobile for what transformative times when they're coming. It translates.
It's the same thing as pole dancing too. Like right before the lockdown, I signed up with the local pole dancing studio here, and first of all, it was an incredible workout. I was so sore, but the other part of it was like so much respect for women who are able to dance like that, because I understood, I got a glimpse of the absolute strength that you need in order to do those moves, but then they make it look so easy and so effortless and so sexy and beautiful that, it was awe-inspiring to me to be able to bring all that together. And as a woman, like that is kind of like, and I don't feel like it's a task. I don't feel like it's a burden. I don't feel like it's a, the rock that we're holding on our backs. I feel like it's this beautiful expression of being a human woman, of being able to have that strength while doing it with this. And that's it.
I think every young woman, I know I experienced this in my early 20s, the first time you actually see a pole somewhere when you're a little bit tipsy and you're like, yay, you like run to the pole thinking that you can do all this fun stuff. And you're like, oh, all I can basically do is like spin around and fall down. Like, it's really very difficult until you know what you're doing and build up those muscles. And I've been to a couple of pole dancing classes too. And honestly, like I was into it, but I was like, this is really hard. And the ones that I went to, you did wear the shoes. That you had to wear, the shoes. The next, there's like, those are high heels, and to be doing all these deep squats and all this upper
takes a ton of strength overall
stuff in those shoes. It's really intense, but very empowering, like you said too. And I love the mirrors. You can check your form. It's like you're moving your body, you're turning yourself on. And when you are, I feel like what you do with your body is the energy that you vibrate out into the world. And so I was even saying to my workout partner, Jess, it's amazing how these movements that we do that men find sexy, that you see in music videos, are the movements that are most efficiently giving you that hourglass figure, which is considered sexy. Like, not to say that that's, the only thing that's sexy, that's not, but that's sort of this standard of beauty. And I wonder if there's a correlation there, with what you're putting out and how you're actually shaping your body.
Those moves are actually really great for our bodies. Like we need to move in those ways so that we have the pelvic floor support in order to be strong and healthy, and also to enjoy amazing sexual pleasure, to be able to push a baby out, to all of those things are interconnected, and it feels good. Like that's the other part of it, right? Like I feel amazing when I dance like that. Great when I get a great workout and I lift weights and I use a punching bag and stuff like that. Don't get me wrong, but there's a different level of like kind of embodied pleasure that comes with those undulating movements, the figure 8 movements, the swaying, the side to side,
flow
and rotation. Very flowy movements. More dance-esque than like static. So it's like, that's super important. And, like there's research, from this, that embodiment piece has effects on our hormones, just like with the, that Superman pose or the, and for women, it's different. The Wonder Woman pose, right? Like, and that creates different hormones in us. Like that to me is fascinating, how we can access brain neurotransmitters with our posture. So just
like lifting heavy weights too. It builds testosterone, not only for men but for us. I know I got into weightlifting in my early 20s, just to get myself. Actually, now that I think back, it was really to get myself in structure, linear. I needed more linear. I needed structure. I needed direction, more of that masculine energy. So I intuitively started myself on a weightlifting program, and I fell in love with it. I lost like 30 pounds. I was like super fit. I was just like loved my whole routine. And now whenever I need to feel powerful, or like I'm making forward progress, or I need a little hit of testosterone to kind of get me going, that's what I do. I'm lifting heavy weights, like you said, that more static that static thing, and it does shift our hormones a bit, in the same way that having a man, a lover who's very nurturing and worshiping me in all the ways, it brings out my estrogen. It brings more estrogen, and I notice my skin gets clearer and my breasts get fuller just from being treated like a goddess and being worshipped. It's really interesting how that happens.
Absolutely. I've actually had the sensation of like my ovaries kind of like, to me, it feels like they're like blossoming or blooming.
Mm-hmm.
Again, like hormonally, that, and that's through, again, like that worshiping, like honoring type of sexual encounter. Like it feels so good, and it's very like nourishing to my female organs. I can feel that. And that it feels really good, like from a health standpoint too. It's just like, oh, it's all, everything's balanced in there. Things are being secreted that need to be secreted. Like, yeah.
Yeah. So what if we brought that into our human interactions, not just our sexual interactions, that deep awareness of how our body feels when we're in a certain situation or with a certain person, or how that awareness of recognizing, like, how you're recognizing his jawline and his smell, like recognizing the beauty in the human that's in front of us, the soul that's in front of us. How does that change their opening up to us, or them being able to be in their vulnerable space, which is also their strength? How do we then create this connection across the planet that can, so that it's not like we're only doing that with our lover in the bedroom, but those sessions in the bedroom carry over into life in general. And so we're moving through life in our senses and more in our bodies, and present and grounded and aware, and slowing down when we need to, and maybe shooting forward when we need to. And that, I think, also is a feminine energy. It's bringing heaven to earth. We're the connector. We are the yoni. We are the yoni, the portal, the divine portal between heaven and earth. And that, I think, is just, we need more of that right now.
Yeah. And I have to say, like, that in terms of that presence and that appreciation and that, like, absolutely kind of just acceptance for this human being in front of you, I learned that from the kids that I work with. Because, when you're talking about children that are pre-verbal, it's not like you can have a conversation with them or explain these things to them. They just know from the energy that you exude that you are there with them in this moment, experiencing this moment together. And that's how they learn to trust you, right? And that's so interesting that they taught me how to be that level of like, I accept you exactly 100% how you are in this moment. And then extrapolating that out into, like, again, relationships at large. It's such a practice to, we've gotten to the point where, like, relationships between men and women, I feel, have been gotten to be very transactional. Like, what can you do for me? Or, I'm a high value woman, I only date high value men. Like, what does that even mean? Everybody has value. Like, right. But that's very pervasive in the dating philosophy, like, world. It's so out there.
These are the behaviors of a high value woman, or high value woman only does this. She doesn't do this. She's not thirsty. She doesn't text back quick.
Right.
These sorts of things.
Oh,
I get
yes.
what you're saying. And I'm like, if I like the guy, I'm excited about his message, I'm gonna give him a text back. Otherwise I'm gonna forget in 24 hours or whatever.
Yeah. Like, what happened to being real? Are you trying to snag this person, or to, like, be a certain way that you're not in order to coerce them to be in a relationship with you? Like, that's so unreal. Like, that's not reality.
Okay. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that, because I think this is one thing I'm enjoying about not dating and just cultivating my friendships, is that there's men who meet you with their intention is to date you. And when you are honest and say, that's not where I'm at, or that's not how I'm feeling right now, or about you, or whatever else, then they don't even want to be your friend, or maybe they'll unfollow you on social media. And that to me is the biggest turnoff, because if you can't be my friend, then how the heck could you be my partner? one day. And so whether it's ego or they're like, I'm looking for a relationship, and if you're not into a romantic relationship, then I'm not interested. And it's like, well, what kind of romantic relationship are you looking for exactly? Just one that you use me as your something, your girlfriend, your wife.
And I think women do that to men too.
Oh, they do. Yeah, absolutely.
It's more, about the, like, if you don't have the resources to provide for me, then.
Oh yeah, that definitely is.
Right.
And really all anybody needs is the resources to provide for themselves, because you don't want to add burden onto someone.
Right.
In a way, she's almost demanding that, right? Like, oh, you have to provide for me. She's like, I need to be your burden, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But and then again, it's not tit for tat. I don't want to make it sound like that either, because we're coming full circle from the conversation about how women ought to be able to rest and focus on growing a baby and doing that internal work and not having to do as much housework.
It's a huge paradox.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, honoring I know we've been on for a while, so maybe wrapping this up soon, but honoring the flow, honoring the ebbs and flows, that's the feminine, and trusting, kind of trusting that alignment and that process. And even if you can't see it yet, it's not linear, it's not structured, it's not planned. And where do we find the balance and then the planet? Because I think we're still tilted like this with the masculine, linear, objective, what we, have to have proof, what we see and believe. And how do we come back to equal on our axis? And like you said, it's not just about being in balance either. We don't want to stop there, because being in balance, you can have a very balanced dysfunctional relationship that keeps you in dysfunction because it's so balanced that you stay in dysfunction. But it's that healthy imbalance that causes the relationship to up level, because now you're up here and the partner's like, well, I'm either going to have to come up like this or I'm going to lose it. And then that's the idea, is you keep going like this until you evolve and rise. And I feel like that's what the feminine is doing right now. It's kind of like it's rising up. And so now, what does the masculine need to do to meet that, so that we can evolve up? And I will continue this conversation with Shafar next week too. So I'm really curious as to what he has.
I'm so curious to hear like the man's perspective on that.
Oh too. Yeah. And he's so wise. He's really great. He's really done his work.
Yeah. Awesome.
So anything else that you would want to highlight or add to this powerful conversation?
No, it feels like we kind of came full circle there. We had a journey, our non-linear journey, of course.
Non-linear journey. Yeah.
We had no idea where we were going to start.
But
we started, and then we went on a whole thing.
Yeah.
And then we kind of like looped back and brought it all together.
What I've been loving about these conversations on the show is they've been personally healing to me, even facilitating them, even having them. And that was my goal of starting my YouTube channel last year, was to have the conversations that heal. Like you said, we don't often talk about these in public. We're not often exposed. And so I'm happy to be that sacrificial lamb too. I'm okay being misunderstood or whatever else, if it means that, we get these conversations out there. And I did not expect that they would be so personally transformative to me, even when many of my guests have been dear friends of mine that I've already known for a while. And so how cool is that? And then to have people that watch the episodes message me after, or maybe they'll message you and they message my other guests and say, oh, I really loved this piece. That was really eye-opening. And I just love hearing that feedback, because we talk about a lot of these things that you and I are talking about today. We've talked about to some extent before, so it's not new information, and sometimes it's a new piece or new awareness to someone else. And I just love that process of creating change and ripples in the world, multi-orgasmic ripples in the world.
Yes, sister, yes.
Yeah. And then I'm also aware of that, having these conversations and putting this work out there too, we are creating a different world for our daughters, and we're creating a different legacy too, so that they don't face, they'll be in the 6th or 7th wave feminism. They'll be taking, the torch to a new level. And we both have very powerful daughters as well. And that makes me happy to be nurturing that connection while we're also doing this other work out in the world.
Yeah, it's such a journey of being a mother, especially to a teenage daughter at this time. There's again, I feel like it's an honor to do it, and there's also a deep sense of responsibility to navigate all of this. So yeah, I'm just kind of just rolling with it. But yeah, I do feel like children learn the most by the way that we are. So that definitely helps to, not that I would do other things, but just in general, like it helps, it informs me in how I want to approach my life or next steps and stuff like that. It's like, oh, I have a 14-year-old watching.
Yeah, I feel that. And mine really watches. She watches
and they they see so much more than you even think. And they can intuit and feel so much more than you realize. So props to them. They are amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And speaking of your work out in the world, are there any ways, if people wanted to get in touch with you, that you're working with folks or that you might be available? I know that you were talking about a website and doing some coaching, but maybe you're not quite there yet. I know you've been really, really busy with the extra pandemic responsibilities now.
I've actually been working more than I ever have in my entire career, in a different way, doing everything virtually, which has been an adjustment. But it's been a learning too, and so I'm appreciative of that and how much we can accomplish doing things even virtually. Like you and I used to hang out together because we lived in the same apartment, and just talk until 3 o'clock in the morning sometimes. And get deep. But now I think doing these helps because we are able to continue call up the same kind of deep conversation and presence with each other, even though it's virtual. So learning how to do that in the clinical context has been really like eye-opening and a good kind of learning for me. But otherwise, I do have a website. It's called optimizedfamilies.com. My coaching is my battery's running low. My coaching is around health, nutrition, and movement, as well as relationships and communication. Like those are I decided that I wanted to be myself in the world. Finally.
I love that. And it's
so
a great self to be.
Yeah. And it's thank you. How hard is it to do that? My gosh, like it's such a, I do identify with being, a healthcare provider, and I went to school to be a physical therapist and all that, those boxes that I put myself in. And finally I was just like, well, I'm just so much more than that. And I want to be all those things. And I want to, encourage other people to do and be all those things too. Like I want to talk about sexuality. I want to talk about relationships. And there are important parts of life that I feel need to be spoken to. And then the movement piece, just because that comes very easily and naturally to me. So helping people to kind of get their workouts and movements, not just for themselves, but for their entire families. Because I do feel like creating a culture of movement and health and relationships and modeling that in the home is actually the most powerful thing we can do as parents. It's, there's a lot of people that go do that whole, like, do as I say, not as I do kind of thing. And so I want to kind of like, bring people back to their like deep integrity so that they're doing right by themselves. And then their children learn from that example of how to be happy, healthy, and free and in service in this world. So it's called Optimized Families, and people can contact me through that website. There's email address. So it's just Michelle at optimizedfamilies.com. I am most active on Facebook, I would say, social media wise, but I do have Instagram as well, Everyday Goddesses. And that's about it for, YouTube to be determined.
Right.
This is helping because this is kind of practice for
you get to see how fun it is.
Yeah, it's super fun. This is very enjoyable. But for right now, it's the website and mostly through Facebook and Instagram. Thank you.
You're always welcome as a guest here. if you want continued screen time practice, I know you already got so much wisdom in here to really share. I've been telling you for years, like, Michelle, you need to get it out because you have so much inside. You just, you know, so much insight, so much
it
wisdom.
helps because you definitely bring it out. I mean, I think we bring it out mutually in each other. Like, we've gone on some like conversational journeys. So so I really appreciate that about you.
Yeah. I would say anybody that has the wherewithal to look back to my Instagram posts, probably all of last year, that you and another goddess were my main catalyst for most of my posts, you know, because I would get into a conversation with you and it would trigger something and be like, oh yeah, I got to talk about this. And so, yeah, those conversations, you know, and I want to honor the goddesses behind the scenes that are kind of like the muse and part of this process as well. Without like exposing you or outing you or sharing all your personal details, right? So it's been an interesting process. So it feels, my point is, I guess it feels really good to go public with this and have the face be out there. And, you know, one of my muses to some of my content.
Thank you, likewise.
Thank you. It's been super fun, and I'm really just excited about future possibilities and future collaborations, you know, between us and what other women out there that are doing this similar kind of work of empowering women and speaking about their experiences. So I'm really excited about that. I just want to remind everybody that's watching too, I'm still doing hypnosis sessions, and I'm looking at I do a mind body skills group I haven't done in a few months. It's been since June, but I'm going to get one going pretty soon in the near future. So I'm always available for that if you want to go deeper with these topics as well. Well, it has been such an honor. I'm really grateful.
Thank you.
Very grateful. And so many more topics that we could talk about. So hopefully we'll set another date to be continued.
Sounds good. Thank you
so much, Michelle.
Thanks.
Good night.
Good night.